And so that was the thing back then. You know, like when I was 15 years old, I flew to South Carolina to spend a week in a shop with a knife maker out there I'd never met.
Let's go.
Welcome to Citizen. We've got a special guest today, Josh Smith from Montana Knife Company. You're a master bladesmith.
I am.
What's that like?
I don't know. I've been one for a while, so I guess it's a good thing to be. It's better than being a shitty bladesmith.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like apprentice and journeyman,
right?
Right. I don't think shitty is one of the titles you can have. I mean, you can use whatever title you want, but I don't think that would be a good idea.
No, I went through all that. I was an apprentice and a journeyman and did all that.
But as a lineman, right? Not as a...
Well, at both, actually.
Okay.
So yeah, actually, with kind of to step back to the knife making part, I started making knives when I was 11. And the guy I was learning from, Rick Dunkerley, he had the foresight to have me join the American Bladesmith Society back then because he could see I was pretty serious about it. And he was like, hey, if you go through all these testing phases and you do all this stuff, like you could be, the youngest to ever do it down the road. And so I joined that when I was 12, and then when I was 15, I tested. So I was an apprentice up until 15, and then when I was 15 years old, I tested for the journeyman smith rating, and became the youngest journeyman in the world.
I didn't know that was a thing. I was just fucking with you because you're a lineman. I assume there's a union up there for that.
There is, yeah.
So what's the guy's name? Rick something?
Rick Dunkerley.
Yep. And he was I think you mentioned yesterday, he's your baseball coach?
Yeah, Little League baseball coach.
And you were, how old are you at the time?
I was 11.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
So you got into this really early.
I did, yeah. No, my parents...
Because there's a lot of people that over the last 5 years have gotten into knife making.
Yep. Yeah, because of Forged in Fire and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was playing baseball, and he was coaching, and he was actually an outfitter in the Bob Marshall Wilderness as well.
Okay.
And so he would bring his hunting knives to practice and show the parents. Mm-hmm. And, of course, being an 11-year-old boy in Montana, I was, just enthralled by it.
It's on brand, yeah.
Yeah, and so I think I must have been a pretty responsible kid because he invited me up to a shop, and he's kind of a no-bullshit guy. But my parents bought me one of his knives for Christmas that year, and then he invited me up to make a knife. And I made one or two up there, and then I think it was his way of telling me to beat it, kid, but he basically said, if you want to be a knife maker, you have to have your own shop.
Right.
So I had a lawn mowing business, and I also worked in my parents' excavation company. And so I bought a belt grinder with my lawn mowing money, and I put it in my dad's shop. And then it wasn't too long, like a year, I was making just a mess in my dad's shop. And he was like,
What was it, like more of a wood shop?
It was more of like, he had a construction company, or it still does. So it was more for like mechanic on equipment. And he's pretty clean and tidy. It wasn't like a grind steel shop and make a freaking mess.
Yeah.
His tools were clean and everything. And so he enclosed a lean-to on our place out kind of in a shed, enclosed it, uninsulated. And it was funny because he actually built my benches in there to the height he thought I would be someday. So there's actually a picture of me in Blade magazine when I'm 12 standing on a milk crate grinding knives. For like 3 years I had to stand on a milk crate. But I worked on knives before and after school. I was kind of knife nerd boy. And
what kind of knives were you making then?
Like hunting knives. Yep. And
something with a sharp edge and some with a serrated edge.
Pretty much just a sharp edge and fixed blade knife, real simple.
Yeah.
And I would take those knives up to his shop and show him, and he would critique them. And basically, I remember over the years being frustrated because I never got like, hey, great job, kid. That's a really good job.
Yeah.
It was always like, well, it's all right, but this is wrong and this is wrong. And that went on for years. But I started going to knife shows when I was 14 and just seeking out all the information I could, asking master smiths for information.
This is pre-internet, so you can't just go on YouTube, right?
100%. Yeah, there was no internet. So,
it existed, but I don't think there were a whole lot of... YouTube didn't exist until, 2007? Is that right? I think
there was definitely no Google. There was no information on the internet. And so that was the thing back then. Like when I was 15 years old, I flew to South Carolina to spend a week in a shop with a knife maker out there I'd never met. He was an old legend. And I just wanted to learn from him. And writing letters back and forth, and met him at a show later on. But yeah, so I mean, I was serious about it. So I tested for the journeyman smith rating and passed, and then you have to be a journeyman for at least 2 years before you're allowed to test for master. And
what do you? Is it like? For some stuff, there's requirements for continuing education, or you have to put a certain amount, like for a certified emergency manager, you have to have a certain amount of on-the-job hours, not just a period of time where you're technically a journeyman, right?
Right.
So did you have to make a certain number of knives or spend a certain amount of time in the shop, or how does that work?
No, that's a good question. So none of that's tracked and measured. You have to be an apprentice for a certain number of years, so you have to be an apprentice 3 years. Then you're allowed to test for journeyman, and what that test is, it's a 2-part test. The first part is a performance test of the blade. So you have to make a blade that has to chop a 1-inch rope in half and
I've
chop.
seen these tests before on the internet.
Yep.
Like people are just walking around at different stations, chopping, cutting, so on.
Yeah, and that was kind of born from this test. So you have to chop a rope in half in 1 chop, and what that shows is this: you can make a sharp knife. But then the next test, you have to chop 2 2x4s in half, as many chops as you want, and when you get done, that blade still has to shave hair, and it can't have any deformations on the edge, no chips, no cracks, all that. And then after that, you have to take that same blade and bend it 90 degrees in a vise without breaking it. And so what that shows is that you have knowledge and control of your heat treatment of your steel. If the blade's too hard, it's going to chip, it's going to crack, or it'll break in the bend test. And if it's too soft, it's going to bend and deform when you're going through the hard 2x4. And it won't hold an edge. It won't still shave after that much cutting. So you have to find this perfect middle ground. And later on in life, like with Montana Knife Company, that's really what our knives are kind of born from, is trying to find that perfect middle ground for people. But anyway, once you pass that test, which I did that out in Eugene, Oregon, you have to do it in a Master Smith shop under his eye. I then went to the Atlanta Blade Show, where you present 5 knives to a panel of Master Smith judges, and they judge your fit and finish of your blades.
It's 5 of the same thing, or you're entering different knives?
Different knives, okay. 5 different knives.
And you have to enter 5 knives.
Yeah,
it's
that's
like
right.
SKUs. You got to bring in, you have to have at least 5.
Yep. And so what you want to do is you want to come in there and show some variation in your work, that you can do multiple things. You can do different kind of handle constructions, and just show that you have a working knowledge of being a knife maker. And the journeyman level, I would equate that to being like, you are showing that you're a professional, but you're not a master yet.
Yeah. I mean, you can work without supervision, but
correct.
Like you're not a premium person yet.
That's right.
Yeah.
But you are definitely, in most people's eye around the country, you're a pro. You're a solid knife maker. So I did that when I was 15 years old. And then I was a journeyman actually 4 years. I was in high school, and I kind of duck hunted my way out of college and drank too much. And so I actually did my Master Smith test right after my freshman year of college. And the Master Smith test is the same test, but you have to do it with a 300-layer Damascus blade, the performance part. So you have to forge that blade. And then your 5 knives have to include 1 Quillian dagger, which is a double-edged dagger. The handle has to be carved, fluted, wire wrapped, like a bunch of kind of fancy shit. But what it shows is, a dagger is actually very difficult to grind because it's symmetrical. So you can grind and do everything right on one side of that blade. You flip it over, you have to match it perfectly. And it's really easy to see imperfections in that. And that's a knife that a lot of people struggle with. So it shows also you can carve wood, you can do like wire inlay and stuff like that. So I did all that when I was 19 and passed that. And at that point I was like number 80 in the world to ever pass that. And now there's like 140.
Yeah. 300 layers. Mm-hmm. So how many folds is that?
So that kind of depends on how you do your initial layup of your bar. So the way I equate this for people to visualize is like if you were to take red and yellow Play-Doh, say strips of it, and you alternate a stack of that. And let's say you stack up 11 layers. So you have 6 red layers and 5 yellow layers. when you roll that out or you press that down, and now imagine this is steel. You have two different alloys of steel, a high carbon steel and like a higher nickel content steel. You roll and press that out, hammer that out into a long bar, say 30 inches long, and you cut that into 6 pieces and restack it. Well, that 11 layers now becomes 66 layers, right? And so you roll that out, you chop that up into, say, 5 pieces and restack it. Now you've got to look through, 330 layers or something.
So it's got to be a minimum of 300.
300,
I
right.
see.
So
is there a purpose for Damascus steel specifically? I mean, it's been around for a while.
Yeah.
Obviously, people have been using this methodology for a long time. Is it having two different types of alloys matter that much?
No, there's a lot of mythology around it. People
it looks cool.
Think about the samurai swords, and they think about there's actually old Damascus shotgun barrels and stuff from the 1800s. I mean, really cool stuff.
There's some old Colt Peacemakers made with Damascus steel too. Yeah. Good luck finding one because they're expensive, but
exactly.
They exist. They're super cool.
But it was believed, like in the samurai days, it was believed that the more you folded a piece of steel, the stronger it got. Like the more you folded it, the more layers. So you'd have these people that have 5,000 layer Damascus blades and stuff. And, if you think about those times back then, they didn't have metallurgists and all that stuff. And some of those different places, whether it was the Persians or whether it was in Japan or wherever, it depended on what kind of alloys did they have at their disposal. And then how were they heat treating them? Some people were plunging those into prisoners to quench their blades at 2,000 degrees. Right. And other people were using water and, goat blood and there are all these different mythological things. What we understand today is it's all about the alloys that you begin with and then the temperatures you heat the steel to and how you bring that temperature down quickly to harden the blade.
It's just like baking, to be honest. Or making candy. So the difference between a hard caramel and a fucking soft caramel is the temperature to which you elevate the sugar. That's it.
Yeah.
You go to 275 or you go higher for it to be harder, and then you cool it more rapidly if you want it to be hard as well. So it's the same general principle then.
Then it's basically identical. Because for a carbon steel blade, if you take it to 1,500 degrees and then you cool it at a fast rate like in oil, or water, which actually water will crack it. It's too fast, which is why we use oil. If you use the right speed oil and you cool it below 900 degrees in under 2 seconds, that blade becomes super, super hard. But if you only heat that blade to 1,400, which is just 100 degrees different, and you do the same process, that thing won't get hard for shit. And so,
how do you make it brittle? Because that's a concern.
So when you come out of the oil at that point, that blade actually is brittle at that point. It's a really high Rockwell, and that's why people use the wrong terminology. They're like, well, how do you temper your blades? Well, actually, tempering is a part of the heat treatment process. So when your blade comes out of that oil, it is rock hard. It's brittle. It's like a piece of glass. When you put it in an oven at 400 degrees for 2 hours, it draws the hardness down. That's called tempering.
Okay.
So it's like you tell somebody, hey, temper your attitude, cool, soften your edge a little bit. That's what tempering is. And when you it's an inverse scale. So when you bring the hardness down, your toughness goes up.
Okay.
And so that bend test that I was telling you about, you could take that blade, bend it in a vise and snap it in 20 degrees. You put it in the oven at 400 degrees for 2 hours. You take it out, you bend that blade, and it maybe goes to 80 degrees and breaks. You put it in the oven for 1 more hour. You take that blade and you bend it right to 90 degrees. Now, if you leave that blade in the oven for 8 hours, you go to chop that 2x4 and the edge deforms.
Sure.
Because you've softened it too much.
So you're looking for the middle ground, I guess.
Yep. Now, a chef's knife, you actually want to leave it on the higher side because, you're not asking that chef's knife to chop boards and hit bone in an elk and do all these things, right, and pry. So a harder edge is going to hold an edge a little bit longer. It's going to be a little more wear resistant. It's going to take a nice, fine, keen edge really well and hold it. But there again, a harder blade's going to be a little harder to sharpen. The harder the steel, the harder it is to sharpen. So I see marketing with some companies, and they're like, well, our blade's 65 Rockwell. Then they make the blade super thick so people can't break it because it's brittle. And then the customer can't sharpen the damn thing because it's a freaking diamond.
Yeah, I mean, you need like a diamond grinder basically to be able to even get into that thing, right? Especially if it's a 1/4 inch thick down at the blade side.
And
how do
then
you sharpen
even
that?
if it is sharp, it's not going to actually cut well for you. It's no one talks about edge geometry, and it's actually one of the most critical things to a knife, because as material, say hide or hair or meat, passes by the edge of the blade, it meets resistance behind the edge in that wedge. So if you imagine like a splitting maul for wood, material doesn't pass by that easy. That's actually the point of a splitting maul, is to drive that material apart. Where an axe, a really fine axe, allows to pass through that material really finely. So that's how it is with the blade. So that's why, choosing your blade, if you're going to Afghanistan, you want to pry freaking doors off of houses and hinges, like, yes, you need a nice thick blade that's probably not going to be as fun to cut with if you're wanting to do fine cutting tasks back at the base. But there again, you don't want to take a real fine pointed dagger or a real fine edge that's thin, that's really great for cutting, and then go pry with it. So,
well, there's no one knife fits all situations, obviously. Right. And why would there be? I mean,
right.
I don't know. I get we're like in this we're in this era in America of the omnibus spending bill, or it's the microwave culture. I need a one-stop shop. I need one thing that does everything for me. It's like, well, why would that be the case? That doesn't work anywhere else in life.
Is there one gun? I mean, there's one gun that you could use for everything.
I mean, I'm not going to pull out my Glock 43X and try to breach a door with it. Right? That's stupid.
Right.
So,
it's
dumb.
Different tools for the job. I mean, I had some DevGru guys in the shop the other day, and we were talking about, like, asking those guys, like, what would be the perfect knife for you guys to use? And they're like, it's so dependent on the situation. Right. Is it an over the beach thing? Is it a freaking door to door? Is it just cutting paracord? Like, is it self-defense? There's just so many different things. So even with hunting knives, I do think the knife that I launched the company with was intended to be as well-rounded as possible if you were going to just carry one. But if somebody tells me, like, hey, I'm going on an elk hunt or a moose hunt, what's a perfect knife for that? Well, it's going to be different than the knife I'm also going to tell you to take trout fishing,
Yeah, so what's then the... a company, I guess, is all about its mission statement at first, and then how you separate yourself from everybody else, right? Otherwise, you're just another widget manufacturer. So what do you think is wrong with most knife companies? Not that there's only one answer to that question, but what do you think is the issue with these folks?
Yeah, and there's some good companies out there. For sure, and to be clear, like in the custom knife world, I'm super close with custom knife makers. I think people always apologize to me. They're like, "Oh, sorry, I've got a knife from so and so or whatever, one from Dan Winkler or whatever." Like, Dan's a freaking great guy.
Winkler, he's the one that makes those tomahawks, right? Oh my God, they're fucking sweet.
Yeah,
the ones that Jack Carr has all the time.
Yep.
Yeah, those things are. I
was doing shows with Dan and Karen when I was in high school. They couldn't be better people.
Yeah.
So it's actually a tight community. And I don't give a shit. I hope you have a Dan Winkler knife. I just want you to also have one of ours.
Yeah.
And it's there again, I equate it to guns. Like, do you just buy one gun, one brand of gun?
Right.
Now, in the hunting space with these knife companies and with a lot of things that I've been, and I'll step back a little bit. After I became a full-time custom knife maker in my early 20s, for years, I was a hunter. And I was going into these stores and I was seeing what was available that the mass production companies were making available to hunters. And I could tell nobody designing and making those knives was an actual hunter.
Right.
It was like, hey, we make pocket knives, but we also, there's a hunting crowd out there. There's some money to be gotten. We should make a hunting knife. And they just crank something out that's thick and heavy, poorly designed. And it was bothering me what was available, the quality level. The other thing that bothered me was how much stuff was being made overseas. And, in my mind, we pass down knives just like we do guns, especially as men. We pass down knives and guns. You could probably add... I
mean, maybe not a pocket knife, but definitely your hunting knives.
Man, I've sharpened
I've got some old pocket knives.
Old pocket knives. People bring me in there like, my grandfather carried this. Will you sharpen? I just want to put it up in my safe. nobody really throws knives away. They might just put them away in a drawer. I know most people have drawers of knives or in their safe. They have a bunch of old knives. But it bothered me that I was starting to see the throwaway culture move into the things that we pass down. Because quite honestly, from multi generations ago, most of us don't have much from our forefathers before us. But some of us have some of their knives or their guns and their prized possessions, and what I was seeing was the throwaway blade, the replaceable blade coming into popularity because people were too damn lazy to learn how to sharpen a knife, or the knife company wasn't providing them a blade that was actually easy to sharpen. And so I when I decided to launch Montana Knife Company, everybody was telling me, you got to do this overseas. You can't compete. And I called bullshit, and we just started making, I made 200 knives in our first run. Yeah. And we sold those, and then we made 200 more. But we did it all here in the U.S. I paid attention to edge geometry, thickness, super lightweight, and we just started building. And it was really targeted towards the hunter, because the other thing is a lot of these companies say they make hunting knives, but you'll go on their Instagram page, they'll talk about hunting season, they'll even show some hiking pictures. Yeah, they're not showing a dead elk on there or a dead bear. They get hate, and quite honestly, I understand why. If 90% of their income comes from pocket knives from REI customers, they're making a business decision. Sure. Where we're saying, hey, we're a hunting knife company. And the other thing I saw a guy do this on a video the other day. His buddy was shooting a video breaking down an elk, and his friend right behind him was changing out a replaceable blade and just tossed that blade off in the woods. It's like you're throwing a freaking razor blade off into the woods for other people, animals, whatever. Like, pack your shit out. If you pack it in, pack it out. Yeah. Especially freaking
That's like
blades.
Boy Scout rule number 1. Yeah. Leave things better than you found them. You don't throw shit out in the woods like that. I mean, that's we think of conservation as hunters as like herd management, right? But it isn't just that. It's taking care of the land. And the West Texas phraseology they like to use is if you take care of the land, it'll take care of you. That's what people say here. And it's absolutely right. And he can tell you, I fucking get mad about litter. Yeah. Like I see litter on the ground walking around when we're driving and shit. I'm just like, you fucking idiot.
It pisses me
off. What the fuck are you thinking you're doing here? I don't understand the mindset of people who are just like casually throwing garbage on the ground. Yeah. That's weird. It's very bizarre to me. Maybe we're just in a different time, I guess. I don't know.
No, I find it bizarre, and we live in a gorgeous state of Montana, and you'll see hunters, and I've done it. Guys I've hunted with be walking along. I just did it in New Mexico. I was walking along, and there was a helium balloon that had come down. It was just laying there.
Probably balloon. A Chinese spy balloon, right?
Probably, yeah. But I picked it up and just stuffed it in my pack. And threw it away when I got back to camp. Yeah. And I was hunting on someone else's property. This was private land. It wasn't public. The least you can do if you're out on someone's land, and that public land, by the way, is your land. It's your taxpayer money. Yep. You should take care of it. Yeah. So
you would think. How much do you have a sense of how much cheaper your products would be if they were made somewhere else? Like, what's the price difference really?
That's a good question, because I never explored what it would cost to go overseas, because I get the emails every week from over in China. Oh, yeah. Manufacturer over here, blah, blah, blah. I never actually even priced it out because it was never an option. I'm sure they would be cheaper. The other thing that I feel like we provide with that price point is, like one of our hunting knives is between $225 and $350. 300,
which is pretty reasonable. Frankly,
it's pretty
for a hunting knife that you're going to have for 10 years that you can send in and get sharpened and shit. Like, what? That's not that much money, man.
And that's the other thing is I tell people, like, you're going to go down and buy a $59, $60 knife at Scheels every damn year. The company isn't going to back it up. Like with us, like you just alluded to, we have our Generations program. If you mail that knife into us, the day we get it, we sharpen it and we ship it back no later than the next day. I had a friend of mine say, dude, you offer that for free. You're gonna like go broke sharpening people's knives. And I'm like, if I'm sharpening that many of our knives, we've sold a shitload of knives.
Yeah, no shit.
Like we're pricing that into our structure.
Yeah. Well, you got a guy though that
Tristan.
the knives come in the morning, and his job is to get them out by that day.
Yep.
Right. Same day, and then you overnight them back.
Tristan's job every morning is to get all the Generations knives, go through them, do any repair, maintenance it needs, rewrap the paracord. That's the thing with like paracord knives. People are like, well, what if it gets dirty and shitty? Like, send it to us once a year. We'll rewrap it for free, and we'll sharpen it and send it back to you. We'll replace screws if they're rusted, or we'll do whatever, you know. But in my mind, now that's something that you can send in and get resharpened maybe after each season once a year for the next 20 years, you know. And that's the thing about having an American-made company is I believe you should stand behind your products. We've had guys, you know, break our knives because I make our knives not to be unbreakable. Like if you abuse it in the wrong way, you're going to break a tip off of it. I generally tell people like, hey, it's not a pry bar, but here's a new knife. We send it to them.
Yeah.
You know, it's about learning the tool for the job, you know. But it's something that we're proud of to stand behind, and quite honestly, it sells. That Generations program, instead of looking like it costs us money, it makes us money because people are like, they tell their friends like, holy shit, I got that thing back in 3 days.
Yeah.
And their buddies buy a knife.
Yeah. I mean, and they buy another one probably,
Yeah.
right? Oh, I need another knife for this other job that I need to do, whatever it happens to be. So I'm going to buy from this company that actually took care of me. So First Form, who is one of our sponsors, and Andy Purcell is a good friend of mine. They've done that since the outset of their company.
Yep.
It is all customer service driven, right? You may like or dislike a particular product, but you can't argue with how they take care of people, right?
So Andy actually was a real driving force for me. So back in 2010, when the economy was dog shit from the housing crisis, I had been making custom knives for a long time, and I was making $5,000 to $10,000 custom knives, and when the economy went to hell, a lot of my backlog of my orders went down like real quick because that's the first thing people cut out of the budget naturally. Yeah. And I had 4 young kids, and when you turn the news on back then, you turn the media on, the world was ending, right? We're headed to a depression, blah blah blah. And so I actually, kind of like you alluded to earlier, I went and took a job. I got an apprenticeship to become a journeyman lineman, and I kind of essentially at that point let the news chase me out of my passions and what I was doing and into something else that was safer, you know, full-time job, union, insurance, benefits, all the 9 yards, right? When I started, when I had the idea of starting MKC in 2020, it was COVID. And we came home from Bert Soren's place out at Sornex in February. We went to a Winter Strong. I came home super motivated to start this company. I'd been around amazing people, and I'm like, we're fucking doing this. And COVID hits, like literally when we were flying home was when shit was popping off. And I started listening to Andy's podcast during that time. And over the next couple months, I was like, this is absolute bullshit what's happening with all this shutdown stuff they're talking about. And when I was listening to Andy's podcast, he was screaming back then in the beginning of that pandemic, there are going to be winners and losers at the end of this. And if you sit back, if you hold back on your business and you play it safe, there's going to be other people that ignore this shit and hammer down. And that was the decision my wife and my business partner and I made. We flat out ignored COVID all the way through 2020.
Well, I mean, it's just like the stock market, right? You buy low, sell high.
Yep.
It's the same principle.
And in 2021, in the dead heat of COVID, our goal for that year was to do 150,000 in sales. And by the end of that year, Brandon and I, we had done 1.9 million. And when we came out of COVID, we were winners out of that thing. And Andy's podcast was a big part of me sitting there listening and going, this dude believes exactly how I believe. Yeah. And I actually went to First Form headquarters. I've never met Andy. I got to meet Sal real quick there. And I got to listen to actually Sal talk to their team members on like a Wednesday morning. Everything that they preach in their podcast, that they are no bullshit. That they run that company. I got a tour of that whole place, and that place is exactly what they say they are. My wife buys all their supplements. She's in super good shape and works out and does all that shit. And she every time she gets a damn order, they've handwritten card in there. You know, they are as legit as can be. So a lot of what we've been doing, frankly, I've modeled after some of First Form stuff. We hold meetings. Monday morning is a meeting about the week. Wednesday morning, kind of based off of what Sal was doing, our Wednesday morning meetings, we have a lot of young employees, like in their early 20s. I just do, I pick topics and I basically do like a class for them on stuff that can make them better personally.
Sure, yeah.
I talk about finances, debt, taxes, how we're building the business, what we're doing, because I want them, you know, if they're the age of my oldest daughter, I would want a company, if she goes to work for someone else, to treat them like that and make better people. And that's the thing. Like, if you buy knives from a company that's making them in China, they're not doing that shit for your kids in your town, you know. I bring in bankers, I bring in insurance people. I try to teach these kids, frankly, what our high schools should be teaching.
Yeah, no shit.
Like personal finance, how the economy works, how the Fed works, you know, what the IRS does, like how taxes work.
Yeah.
I
would get rid of, I say this a lot, I would get rid of the foreign language requirement in high school, because who fucking cares, right? I mean, you can learn that shit on Babbel or something in your free time. Have these people doing practical stuff. Finance is a good one. And I think there should be some kind of civic or community service requirement for high school graduation. 4 semesters. You have to spend 4 semesters during high school at some point at a soup kitchen or Boys and Girls Club or some shit, right?
Yeah.
I just don't understand. Our education system isn't set up to educate people. It's set up to make compliant workers. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And feed them into the fucking college mill factory at this point. So,
my kids are in the 4-H program, and they have to do some of that stuff. They go deliver gifts to the like old folks' homes at Christmas, and they go
Meals on Wheels is another good one.
Christmas Carol and do different things, and it's they make Christmas ornaments for the retirement home for their tree, and they go talk to the old people, and it's just little things that make them think outside of themselves. You know, quite honestly, my kids raising their animals, no matter what they have going for their sports, practice, games, their 4-H steer in the barn doesn't give a shit about their football game, what time they got home on the bus. Like, they still have to go feed their animal.
Yeah.
And to have kids have to be responsible for something else besides their own little lives is, to me, it's important.
And have non-negotiables, right? Because it's like, you look at the divorce rate in this country, marriage became negotiable at some point. You know what I mean? Do you know what and this is kind of a weird statistic, but if you had to guess what the divorce rate for arranged marriages was, what would you guess? Because right now the U.S. divorce rate is about 55%.
Well, you would think arranged would be higher. You'd think it'd be like 70% or something.
4.
Yeah.
Right? Because these people come into the relationship knowing that that's where they're going to be. And then they commit to making the relationship the best it can be, instead of saying, well, I've got other options. I could go on some fucking dating app or Facebook and link up with somebody I was with in high school or some shit like that. But teaching people that there are non-negotiables in life, like, this is the path that I've committed to and I'm going to be the best at it, right?
Right.
Is super fucking important from a very young age. We just don't do that anymore. Like, this idea of having a knife that you pass down from one generation to the next. Sure, it's an effigy for your relationship with your parents or your grandparents or whatever that happens to be, but it's also a responsibility. You know what I mean? Like, that knife is your family crest, for lack of a better phrase, and I'm not going to go out there and embarrass it. I'm going to take care of it. I'm going to keep it. You know what I mean? Yep.
There used to be things when we used to hand make things, even like furniture. You used to pass down some things, and these days, everything, whether it's relationships or it's something you buy at the store. Like, if you walk into Target and look around, everything is made to throw away in 18 months.
Yep.
Like,
and that, by the way, that's what almost killed the American car industry. Is they made progressively shittier products, so they would break down and people would have to buy a new car every 3 years instead of every 10. That's what they did, and then raised the price on it and so on and so forth until we got to this situation where nobody can. Like, it's almost like your phone now. Like, the phone costs as much this phone costs as much as this computer.
Right.
Same price, right? Which, fair enough, whatever.
Yeah.
But then you buy one every year.
Yeah.
Like a sizable portion of the population flip this thing once a year.
Well, like anything electronic these days, washing machines, fridges, dryers, deep freezers. My parents, their gift from their parents when they got married was a deep freeze, and they had that thing up until I think 3 years ago, and they've been married for almost 50 years.
That's ridiculous.
But those old GE products back in the day lasted forever, and now, you build a home, you're lucky to get 5 or 6 years down the road, and your washer and dryer go out, and there's no customer service there. We just dealt with it. I just paid a guy to come out to the house and fix both of our washer and dryer, and I built my house 7 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's like a 5-year home appliances. 5 years is about the cutoff.
Yeah.
That you're lucky to get that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's
for sure.
It's a lack of pride ultimately will lead to a lack of expectation. You know what I mean? I say this a lot. I'm sure people are getting tired of hearing it, but an old English author, G.K. Chesterton, used to say that men didn't love Rome because she was great. Rome was great because men loved her, right? And it's like that, having that sense of pride and wherever you're from. It doesn't, like, you don't have to be an exceptionalist. There are countries that are good other than America. I've been to a lot of them. There's a bunch of dope fucking places to go hang out. But I say to myself, this is the best country because I'm going to fucking make it the best country. And if you're not willing to take that second step and commit to making the thing you're saying true, then you're just a leech. You're a piece of shit, in my opinion, right? You're just, and then it, predictably, kind of just deteriorates into, well, is America the best country in the world? Like, it's such a facile, useless argument. Like, we're not trying to have a fucking debate and then have judges hold up scorecards for the best country. That's not what
but
it is.
France should believe the same thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Germany should believe the same.
And then make your country the best. Well, Germany may need to calm down a little bit, but the rest of them,
But those countries should all everyone should have the same belief and do the best they can to make their country the best.
I mean, we do that with, like, if you're on a professional sports team, if you're on the Braves, and you don't think of your, like, Chipper Jones used to call it necessary arrogance, right? Like, you have to be confident. You have to, because with confidence comes full potential effort. Right. We just don't do that. We look at it like it's something that just happens. You know what I mean? It's like being I don't know, like, some people go into businesses, they think, oh shit, it's clean today. Like, people came in overnight and did that, but it's not magic. You know what I mean? There's no fucking. This isn't the sword in the stone.
Unless you're
spells.
first form.
Yeah, fair enough.
And then your employees clean, and that's how we do it at our shop now. I tell our employees, you care for this place as if it's your own house, and everyone takes part in cleaning it and cleaning up after themselves, and that actually leads to, like, we talk about how do we make our country great, and you should have this pride, but in practicality, how do we actually do it? And this is where, to me, and I'm shining the light on us just for a second, because we're an example that this is actually possible. Like, I was just a stupid goddamn lineman, right? And I started doing this. I started building this company before and after work, morning and night. And I had a day job up until this thing was actually, like, really up and running. Okay. And what we are building in our own little community, if every community across the country had one of whatever we're doing in whatever industry, it doesn't matter. That's really how you actually put pride back in this country. We're lacking pride as a country because people go to their jobs, and a lot of these people are absolutely freaking miserable because they don't have any pride in what they're actually doing. They're standing there. They don't have any real pride. And our employees, if you ask them, we have 30 employees now. I actually prefer to hire super young employees. Everybody shits on the youth of America. I will tell you right now,
fuck that.
I would take a 22-year-old kid right now in my shop over a 38-year-old fucking guy with a grudge that thinks that we owe him a certain place in our company because he's 38. And
well, I'll tell you this. So when you go to when you pass selection for tier 1 units in this country, whether it's DevGru, Delta, whatever you want to call them, any of the SMUs. After you pass selection during your OTC, your operator training, you go back to basic rifle marksmanship. Start all over because we're going to do it all again. We got our own way. We're going to do it all again. That tabula rasa thing, the blank slate, it's a lot easier to take somebody without any bad habits and mold them into what the fuck they're supposed to be. And I think it's really what you guys do and what Andy and Sal do at First Form. You're essentially not treating people like children, but you're behaving the way that a parent would behave, right? Because you're a fucking leader. The principles of leadership are the same whether it's your child or an employee or just random people out in public, right? It's always the same.
Right.
Why would it be any different? To the pride thing, I don't think people know what pride is anymore. They have shallow pride. They're proud of things they had nothing to do with. But in reality, pride is a result of overcoming shame, right?
Right.
Pride is this belongs to me and there's shit on the floor. I'm going to clean it up, right? Because it's shameful that I would have shit on the floor in my goddamn office.
Right.
You know what I mean? That is what pride is. Pride is pride is an action verb. It is the overcoming of shame, whether you have been ashamed or you're just trying to prevent it in the first place.
Right.
And people don't understand that. There's a huge disconnect between effort and outcome now. It's a lot of expectation, and without any expectation that eventually the hot potato is going to land in your hands.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you got to do something about it.
Well, and we read letters that our customers send us. We read them to our employees so they understand the kind of impact that they're having. And we're just a knife company, right? Like, what are we really having an impact? But actually, we really actually do have an impact in people's lives. And people talk about, I gave this knife to my son, and he's 12 years old, and he went on his first hunt, and he shot his first deer, and we sat there and cried together, and we shared in this experience, and it does matter. And I tell my employees, we sponsor local little league teams. This year we went to the local 4-H sale where my kids sell their stuff, and we bought some kid in our community steer, and we put all that meat in our freezer in the shop for the employees to take home at night. And I told those guys, I said, when you're eating that meat at home, you're eating meat that your company bought with the money that you helped make, and you're helping support a 14-year-old boy that's on the neighboring ranch next door, and now he gets to buy a steer for next year. And all of that is coming from the impact that you're making locally. When we had flooding up there in Montana last year, down around Yellowstone Park, we ended up launching these "Come Hell or High Water" T-shirts. And we ended up selling $80,000 worth of T-shirts and donated it all to the Red Lodge Area Community Foundation, and to help. And specifically, it was a nonprofit to help farmers and ranchers, because FEMA and all their fucking brilliance, when they come in with FEMA money, it doesn't help businesses. And guess what ranches and farms are? They're businesses. It was only help residents. So these ranchers and farmers, of which that community is mostly made up of, their entire hayfields are buried in rock and gravel from these floods. They have no hay crops for the year. They can't feed their cows, all that stuff. All that meat goes into the local economy, butcher shops, restaurants, stores, and FEMA doesn't help them, right? So we go and raise $80,000 and give it to them as a 3-year-old company. We flew 20 veterans in the first year. Brandon and I didn't take a paycheck until June. And that year in August, we flew 20 veterans in and taught them how to forge knives and do different things. And it was not to make them knife makers, but I don't like this idea of, of just handing veterans money because they have PTS or whatever.
Yeah.
To me, and I'm not a veteran, so I might be speaking out of my ass, but I would rather hand that guy the tools to know, hey, you can spend $100 on a forge and go to a scrapyard and buy an old piece of railroad tie. And when you're struggling a bit at night because you're off from your job at 4 o'clock and you don't go to bed till 11, for that 5-6 hours, you can go out to your garage and beat on steel and forge blades. You can forge hooks for your wife's kitchen. You can make a gate. You can become a blacksmith in your part-time evening. And anybody that's ever forged anything, if you go beat on a hot piece of steel that's 2,000 degrees and you're hammering away and you're sweating your ass off, you're not thinking about anything but that piece of steel. And time passes fast. But our company does that kind of stuff. And there again, you don't see these companies making shit in China doing that for their local community.
Well, ironically, it was a Chinese man who first wrote down this sentiment that you're talking about. His name is Lao Tzu. He's a philosopher. In 571 BC, I believe, is when he was born. Right. So we're talking about 2,600 years ago, and that's where the teach a man.
So
to
the
fish.
year Biden was born.
Yeah. Well, a couple years before that. I think. It's the teach a man to fish thing that you've seen in multiple philosophies. It's in Proverbs. If you're a Christian, you've seen it before a lot. And no, you're not speaking out of turn. That's very old wisdom that we seem to lose every time we get into a crisis. I wrote a piece for Newsweek not too long ago about this. How you don't take especially a man whose prime directive biologically is to provide and protect, and then coddle them when they're down. You give them tools to process what they're going through, and then you give them a fucking job to do. Period. It is the simplest formula ever, and we could not have fucked that up worse.
Right.
And that's why we have record suicide to this day. As a matter of fact, it's going up right now. It's not going down.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, it's
they need a sense of purpose.
Yeah, you have to have something like that, and then it's like there's a lot of there's barriers to entry because it's like, well, what can I do? What can I do? You know what I mean? But these are practical examples. You find yourself, if you're a leader in a workplace, create the kind of workplace where people are developing a sense of ownership over what they're doing, and they will have purpose in that job. And then if you're past that point, if you're self-employed or you don't, or if you're someone who doesn't work in the traditional way for whatever reason, there's still so much other shit to do, like coaching Little League, for example, which you're doing. You're coaching football now.
Yep.
And then you mentioned something earlier that I talk about a lot too. It's like treating people in a way that you would want your family to be treated. If you're a man out in public and you see a woman or kids, or a woman with kids, or whatever, or anybody, even old people or even another man, like, imagine that's your family member. How would you want them to be treated? Right. Not just politeness, but do you want somebody holding the door for them? If you're on a fucking airplane and somebody's trying to put their luggage up and it's a woman that's 115 pounds, are you going to stand up and do that for her? Or are you going to fucking sit there and watch like an asshole?
Right.
You know what I mean?
100%.
There's so many simple things, and you have the opportunity, multiple opportunities every single day to do this shit. It's one of the principles of the show is I'll do something every day to help my country. My countrymen are all men. Super simple, right? You can do that shit every day. And then think about it that way. And I promise you, if you're fucking depressed and you start helping people, you're going to not be depressed anymore.
Yeah.
That's just how life works.
100%. It's absolutely something I believe in. And I it's interesting you say that, because I don't look at my employees like they are my children, but they are. It is similar in that, one of the Wednesday morning meetings talks I gave them, and I know Frasilas have done this with their people, is when you're wearing that Montana Knife Company hat or sweatshirt out in Missoula, just around town on a Saturday, you're representing our company. And we're getting widely enough known that people are, and we actually highlight employees on our social media, because I also want to build their presence. I want them to feel like they're a part of the team. I want our customers to know and see who's making their knife. Like, most days it's not me, right? It might be Melissa, it might be Lauren or Tristan or Travis, but I want them to be able to see behind the scenes what we do, which is why we do our vlogs every day.
Yeah.
But I tell those employees that comes with a responsibility, because now they know who Tristan and Laura and Melissa is. And so on a Saturday out in Missoula, when you're helping your neighbor, when their garbage gets tipped over by a bear or dogs or whatever, you're helping them out and you're wearing that hat. People are noticing that stuff, and if you're acting like an asshole, they're also noticing that.
Yeah. And it's that's shameful, right? So you stare shame in the face, you let it challenge you instead of embarrass you into silence, because that's a big thing too. It's the bystander effect. People don't want to get involved and help other people because they're worried about something or other, right? It's like, fuck that, man.
Right.
Imagine it's your fucking friend or family member or whatever being victimized, or even if it's victimized by circumstance, you know what I mean? how quickly would you react? Mm-hmm. And that's how quickly you should react, regardless of who the person is.
We actually on our reviews, one of our boxes that we grade them on is called ownership. And so ownership, one of the other boxes is time. So it's like if you're just coming in, you're just putting your 8 hours in and going home. That's fine, but owners do more, right? Yeah. And when we're behind on something, are you volunteering to come in early? Are you working on a Saturday? Are you doing whatever it takes to get the job done? But the ownership piece also is how, picking up that piece of garbage, offering to help train that new person that's there, seeing something around the shop that's not perfect. We tell them, we want you to bring processes. We want you to come and say, hey, this is over here, what we're doing is stupid. Yeah. And we need to fix it.
I mean, who knows better than, and so in the military, there's a lot of fucking weight from the brass. There's a lot of command structure that leans on you when you're trying to do operations. They're like, look, dude, I'm fucking on the ground here. Shut the fuck up. You don't know what the fuck's going on. You could have all the knowledge in the world, the institutional knowledge in the world, but if you aren't here right now doing it and the way we're doing it, then you don't know what the fuck you're talking about, right? So, provide me with some insight from your knowledge base, but listen to me when I'm telling you that what you're doing is not working because I'm the one doing it. That seems like a pretty simple thing to do, right?
Yeah.
But it comes with, with that's one of the hardest things to do as a business owner, frankly, is to take a step back and let somebody else do work that you've been doing.
Yeah, and honestly, that's part of why I registered the name Montana Knife Company when I was 19 years old, but I never started it until I was 39. And a big part of that is I knew, frankly, I wasn't mature enough. I wasn't ready. I financially wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to lead a company. I had no idea how to build a company. I mean, quite frankly, even when I launched it, I still was trying to figure this shit out. I still am today. But that empowering other people to do the job for you and trust them to do it and train them to do it. We tell our employees, we want to try and make this process so foolproof that if you make a mistake the first time, that's our fault. We didn't train you well enough, whatever. If it's over and over again, that's either our fault because we haven't put in systems to fix that, or it's your fault because you haven't followed the practices and whatnot that we've set out. But that ownership piece, again, that leads to the pride that people can go home at night and go, I laid everything out today. I did my absolute best. I acted like an owner. I helped so-and-so in the shop. I picked up garbage. I did all this. And they can go home feeling like they accomplished something. And I don't know. I'm a big believer in that it doesn't have to be huge manufacturing. I'm not talking about manufacturing coming back in this country from a gigantic standpoint. Yes, that'd be nice if Caterpillar brought all of manufacturing back, right? Or whoever, whatever the company is. But I'm talking individual people can start small business around the country. Where we're at, we need butcher shops. You go to take a steer to the butcher shop and they're like, oh, it's going to be 5 months. It's unbelievable. Like, we need small business and we need manufacturing, but we also need government to stay the hell out of the way. Yeah. Because I was told the other day, I was talking to a guy and telling him he should start a business, a butcher shop, and he said you literally are not allowed to do it in Missoula County because of all their bullshit laws, right? Their liberal bullshit stuff. So, the paying the taxes, the amount I explained to my employees the amount of money we sent out in taxes in April. We just worked for the next 3 months to make up for that.
Yeah. Well, people have this. So people will look at their salary for the year and the amount of taxes they paid and think, well, shit, my effective tax rate was, 15 or 20 or 30% in some cases. It's on average in America, your effective tax rate is 54%.
Yep.
54, because you as a business owner, you bought products from somebody who was taxed on them, and you get taxed on the purchase of that product. So there's two taxable events right there. Then you pay payroll tax to your employees who produce a product who you then get taxed on as well. And then you go spend money and you pay sales tax everywhere you go. Then you buy a home, you pay tax on that, and you pay tax on that property for the rest of your life.
And then you pay gas tax, you pay a resort tax, you pay
everything. It comes out to about, on average, for the average American, you pay 54% of your money gets consumed by the government.
So I on one of my Wednesday mornings, I explained to my employees, I said, let's just say I used 40% as the number for them. I said with your state sales tax or your state income tax, your federal income tax, property taxes, all that.
And God forbid you have money, then you're paying capital gains tax as well.
Yeah, and I explained to him, you might not think that you're paying property tax because you rent, but guess who's paying property tax?
I promise you, it's folded into the rent.
It's
bud.
you paying.
They're not fucking eating that cost.
No. But I
Black
explained
Rock
to
and
them,
State Street are not eating that cost.
and this is what I think people. This is to me, if we explain to people this structure, they'd care a lot more about their government going on. So let's just say it's 40%. Okay, what's 40% of 365 days? Like 170 days or something like that. 180 days. Yeah, it's more than that. It's like 200 days.
It is 40%. It's 146 days.
146 days.
Yes.
So let's just say next year that the federal government came out and said, okay, we got a new tax structure. Next year, for the first 146 days of the year, all the money that you make will just come to the government, and you don't have to worry about the IRS. You don't have to worry about you're doing your taxes. You don't have to. We're just going to take all the money up front. So for the first 146 days of the year you work, you're not going to make a dime in money. And then by the end of the year, the rest of the year, everything is yours, right? At the end of the year, it's all the same.
Yeah.
So for 146 days next year, and what is that in what is that, 4, 5? That's 5 months, basically. For the first 5 months of the year, you're not going to make a penny. If you actually structured the tax system like that, people would be real engaged in their voting process.
Yeah, but that's not how scams work, right?
Right.
You just take a little bit at a time.
Right.
It's the VIG, right? Like we're in a huge numbers racket,
Yeah.
a mob-based numbers racket, and the government is the mob. That's essentially what we're in.
I say what I told a Congressman Rosendale the other day on the phone. I should be able to sue the federal government and say I refuse now to pay taxes until you guys can account for where my tax money goes.
Yeah. Balance one budget.
Yeah.
Like the DoD, for example, the Department of Defense, they haven't had they do an audit every year. They haven't passed an audit since before 9/11.
Yeah. Yeah.
As a matter of fact, on September 10th, 2001, Donald Rumsfeld, you can fucking fact check this all you want. Donald Rumsfeld, and it's unrelated to 9/11, and it's for a marker in time. That's it. Relax. Relax with the conspiracies. But he announced the day before 9/11 that there was $1.7 trillion missing from the federal budget. Like how is that possible? Trillion with a T? Are you fucking serious?
Yeah.
And this is before, government swelled to the level it was now. So where did all that money go?
Yeah.
Trillions of dollars. Well, you know where it went. It went to Lockheed and Raytheon and General Dynamics and fucking Boeing and all these other fucking companies.
Rogan and I were talking last night. We were bullshitting about all this stuff, and we were talking about all the money that we're sending to Ukraine while we have smoldering ashes in Maui of our own citizens' homes and businesses completely demolished. And not that I necessarily personally think the federal government should actually pay to build back people's homes and businesses. That's a whole nother discussion about what the federal government really should be for. But if we're going to argue to send money to another country, then it's pretty easy to turn around and argue we should actually be taking care of our own country first. And like Rogan said last night, we accidentally sent $6 billion to Ukraine, but if you do the math on what it would cost to build every home and business back in Maui completely ground up, it'd be $5 billion. And we just accidentally sent $6 billion over there in a mistaken budget process or whatever the hell they were doing. It's just mind-boggling.
It is absolutely insane. But your premise is correct that you have to demonstrate to people like you're doing with your employees and like we need to message better. This is why I do this show with people. It's easy to get whatever people call black-pilled, like, oh, voting's pointless, I'm not going to do that anymore. We should pay attention certainly to to how our voting is happening, like the mechanics of it, because people are fucking around with that stuff.
Right.
But it does matter that you're involved.
Yeah.
It matters that you're fucking involved and preferably at the lowest possible level, but energetically at the lowest possible level. You were talking about, FEMA coming in. When FEMA comes in and handles an emergency situation, you're absolutely right. They go to Walmart.
Yeah.
That's where they go to get their shit. They go to Walmart, they go to Target, Amazon, so on and so forth. But the reality of the situation, you're talking about a community that it needs to rebuild, right? There's something has happened there and they need help. So what effectively happens is people get farther on the tit of government, and then they lose their ability to provide for themselves. $1 sent to Walmart is $1. It's gone, right? $1 spent at a local butcher shop multiplies 7 to 11 times before it leaves that local community. 7 to 11 times. So, you know, these are things that we can probably figure out relatively easily. You know, it's like you don't have to personally be a business owner to understand this shit, but you get to it's. People have said this many times before. I think it actually sprouted from the labor movement back in the day. But every dollar you spend is a vote for the kind of world you want to live in. You know what I mean? And if you want fucking corporate overlords, keep buying shit on Amazon all the time. You know what I mean?
It's why I made a choice 6 or 7 years ago to refuse to wear any hat or shirt that is of any company that I don't absolutely support and basically know the owners of. You'll see me wearing Black Rifle stuff. You'll see me wearing Meat Church or Volquartz and Firearms or Nosler, you know, Leupold, companies that are American companies, people I know that are doing the right thing or at least trying. You know, and I'm definitely, I was going to say to what you were just saying, one of the, probably the best things that makes me feel the best about what we're doing is an example of where we buy all of our wood products. So our cutting boards, our knife hangs, that stuff, we're having those custom made by a family in Billings, Montana. Those guys have grown a business, hired employees, all basically around the demand that we've created on them. Because every chef set that we buy is a potential customer that wants now a cutting board or a block and that stuff. And he's told me several times how much he appreciates what we're doing for his family and his company. And it's not even something that I like set out to do or intend to do. And it's just the consequence of having a business operating in this country. It's the same thing with all our leather goods. They're all made in Idaho by Francesca with Teton leather. So to your point, that stuff is getting spent over and over and over in this country. Yeah, it's why it's a catchy little quip, but I like to say, when we all do better, we all do better, right? Yeah. Like it's just that's why capitalism works if it's not fucked with by governments and predators and large government. I am a hypocrite though, when it comes to, and I've heard you say this before. I've heard you say it on Drinking Bros and on here. We can bitch all we want about our federal government. None of us really individually are changing that. We can vote, we can do our best, but it's a dumpster fire that just continues to have gas poured on it. But to be more involved, and part of me just absolutely dreads the idea of doing it, but more involved on a local level. Like we have a West Valley Community Council. I've never been to a meeting. Yeah. You know, and quite frankly, I was discussing some things with some of our county members because we're looking at land and building a building and all these things, and we're gonna have to deal a lot with the county and permitting processes, which again I also dread. But it made me realize those are the levels that we need to be involved in. I mean, because like our city community council in Missoula, it's a dumpster fire as well. I mean, but you can bitch about all you want, but I've never been to a meeting. You know, so. You know, well, I mean, so Plato said, if you refuse to take part in your own governance, you're doomed to be ruled by fools, right? Yeah. Like the worst and dumbest motherfuckers that exist will slide right into that power vacuum, and they'll fucking make hundreds of millions of dollars over the course of their political career. Yeah. By fleecing the fuck out of you, right? Yeah. And they're a middleman. Politicians in America are middlemen for large corporations who are just trying to extract wealth from the population. That's all they are. Yeah. But, you know, there's a lot of ways to fight back against that. The most important one is to patronize small business, start small business, get involved in local politics, right? Yeah. And you have, on Drinking Bros yesterday, when we recorded yesterday, you gave Drinking Bro of the Week to your wife. And it is true that behind every great man is a woman that's supporting and pushing them. I love the story of John Adams and his wife. His wife was like his closest confidant. This is in a time when women didn't necessarily have any fucking rights or say in public and shit like that. But this man who helped shape the fabric of America
didn't go to his attorney colleagues for advice. He went to his wife. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think it's an important that's a really important thing to do, is to have good partners, whether it's your wife or the people you associate with. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The friends that you keep, because you will tailor your experience in life to the people that are around you. That's just a natural human thing to do. We're born through community like that. So I'm glad that you have that, and now you've kind of converted that in some way into the way that you even do business, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like from a leader, you're a leader,
yeah.
right? And you behave as a leader. It's important to fucking do that shit.
Yeah, and honestly, I'm definitely an imperfect leader. I mean, I'm learning, because I've never been in this position before. I was, a custom maker forever in my own shop, and then I was a lineman on a crew. But it's come from observing other people that I think are really great leaders. Andy being one of them. With First Form. I've learned things from watching, Evan at Black Rifle, what they've done, what they've built in a short amount of time, good and bad, right? When you see these different leaders make different moves, asking a lot of questions and frankly relying on some of the people that I hire. So I think the most important, I look at myself really as a general manager of a baseball team. If you can put the best pieces on the field, then you can win championships. Yeah. None of this stuff is going to happen if I just try to do it all myself. My director of operations, Andrew, he was a former Ranger, worked at Amazon, absolutely phenomenal guy. My business partner, Brandon, does our marketing stuff, just phenomenal. So I've got a hell of a team around me. But my wife, she's the one really that. She leveled me up in a lot of different ways, honestly, when we got married, because I had 4 young kids. I didn't think I was ever going to get remarried. Yeah. Because I'm very selective and very picky. I might be shitty at a lot of things, but I'm a good dad. I'm a good father. I have really good kids. I hate kids that are assholes. My kids are not assholes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like dogs. Yeah. There aren't bad dogs.
Yeah, there's just bad dog owners. Yeah. No, and I have phenomenal kids. But when she came along, she was the one that, when I told her about kind of my dream of this company, she was like, I have the kids, I got the house, get to your shop, put in the hours. And now she's the head of our customer service. So if you email Montana Knife Company, it's Jessica that answers. And the reason for that is I want someone that cares to the amount that we as owners care. Talking to our customers, so it's not just a customer service teenager. We have other young kids in other positions in the company, but when you email in, if you have a problem, it needs to be addressed. We want to take care of that.
Yeah. I mean, it's you're choosing, and to some small degree, the people, certainly your spouse, and to some degree, your friends as well, but the people that you work with, the type of business you do, you're choosing the people that you're going to war with. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's so, you better be fucking careful.
Yeah.
I would say trust your senses. Your brain is a lot better at being a brain than you are at thinking.
Yeah.
93% of all communication is nonverbal. So if you're getting a weird vibe from somebody, there's a fucking reason for it. Yeah. You should pay attention to that shit. And that doesn't mean you just write people off either. A lot of these, there are some people who are shitty people because nobody's ever fucking told them to stop being shitty.
Right.
So, grow some fucking balls and be like, hey, dude, this behavior is unacceptable. But then, this is what I talk about with bullies a lot. If you got young kids, that stuff's going to happen from time to time. Maybe. Hopefully it isn't your kid doing the bullying, but if it isn't, I think we handle that situation the wrong way. We demonize the act of bullying and thus the bully. Like, that's just a bad kid. Well, that's not true. It's a kid who's probably getting bullied by their parents or somewhere else, right? Or they're not getting attention. So, triage, stop the bullshit that's going on and put some distance between, the bullied and the bully. But then maybe get down on that kid's level and ask him, what the fuck's going on here, bud? Yeah. Like, why are you doing this? And try to understand him. And the same is true when you are dealing with adults, whether it's subordinates of yours, your friends, or whatever, right?
Right.
Like if pride is the result of overcoming shame, then you have to apply some degree of shame to give people their pride back.
Yeah.
That's just the way it is. And maybe you're a dick for it sometimes.
No,
I'll accept that.
Yeah, and to your point, my boy has always been the biggest, strongest kid in his class. He's a big kid. Like he's 15 now. He's 6'4" and 205 pounds. He's a monster. And so he always was the kid that could bully if he was raised that way. But I always told him, with being the biggest and strongest kid comes some responsibility to help protect the kids that can't. And I love that old analogy of are you a wolf, a sheep, or a sheepdog? And I've explained that to him since he was young. Like if you see when your little buddy's being picked on, you step in and stop it.
Yeah.
And at times you might have to actually just flat out punch somebody in the face. But most of the time just stepping in and saying, hey, that's enough is all it takes. And
sure, yeah.
I've gotten messages from his teachers where he's done that stuff, and all the accolades on the football field. That he's a hell of an athlete. All those things with all my kids, they all are. I've always told them I've never been more proud than when I get a message from a teacher like, "Hey, this kid was really down today, and your son Hank went over and like pat him on the back and told him it was going to be all right." And that just happened recently where he basically took a kid that wasn't one of the cool kids. Hank is the cool kid, and he went and took him under his arm and told him he was going to be fine. And those are the things like helping your community. There again, you can teach your kids to do that stuff as well.
Yeah, we used to. I mean, that was the standard. We in the U.S. and America, we raise protectors, right? Not everybody's going to be big, strong, fast enough to physically protect other people,
right?
But there's a lot of danger in the world. It's not all physical.
Right.
You know what I mean? There's bad ideas. There's fucking depression. There's all kinds of shit. And it's whatever gift you have, and sometimes it's just the gift of having had a negative experience before.
Right.
It is not just an opportunity, but it's a responsibility to leverage that towards the betterment of society, particularly those closest around you. And that's why that's my favorite principle of ours, to help people, because it is, one, it doesn't cost you shit. Right? There's no cost to that. But the benefit isn't just present and immediate, but it compounds over time.
Yeah.
Somebody who gets help goes and helps somebody else. That's how it works, typically, right? And there's no reason not to do it either. But, it doesn't stop in the same way that, if you're not a parent of an actual child or something, that doesn't absolve you of the responsibility of being a leader in your community. Just in the same way that once we take off the uniform, the military uniform, our service doesn't end there, right? Like now, especially these days, as fucked up as shit is, your service may be just beginning at that point, frankly. Yeah. So it's like, except if you want to live in a world that's a bunch of fucking dumb cunts on TikTok doing stupid shit all the time. People stepping over homeless people, or just the homeless crisis that we have right now. All the crazy, stupid shoplifting shit that's going on, and just all the dumb shit in society. If you want to live in that world, good. Go back to your house, watch TV for 4 hours a night, and don't interact with people. But if you want to live in a world that fucking matters, a good world, then just put that little bit of effort. Is all it takes. It's all it takes. We carry this in buds. They carry around a 400-pound log, right? But it's 12 dudes, so it's not that heavy. You know what I mean?
Until somebody's not doing their job.
Until somebody doesn't do their job, then it gets progressively heavier. Every single person who says, you know what, I'm gonna fuck this, I'm not gonna vote, or fuck this, I don't believe in this anymore, or this isn't worth my effort. Every single person that drops out of that makes it heavier, right? And eventually the log drops. And the secret of all this, there's two. The first is that the weight never gets lighter. You get stronger, right? And the second is we can't do it alone. Like you can't do it alone, and that's the shame. That should be the shame. It's like when I grew up, it was shameful for somebody else to be working and you sit down and watch them or something. Like there's no fucking way I could do that. And it wasn't like I didn't get told that. It was just by watching other people around me. And then you really experience it in the military, or in sports teams or whatever.
It's the same way with with the lineman culture. A lot of people told us, guys that would come and work would say it's about as close to the military as they had ever been, was the lineman deal.
Because your big events are emergencies and people need power to stay alive. You know what I mean? It's it's a serious situation.
And your life is literally on the line, and so is your brother's next to you in that bucket truck. So, there was a lot of trust. When you came in as a groundman, you were lower than whale shit. You shut your mouth and you do you work, right? Yeah. And you stay better. You stay busy. You better never just be standing around looking at your phone.
Right.
If there's nothing to do, go clean the truck.
It's not about hazing too. People think that I'm a young guy, so they're giving me shit. It's like, no, I'm trying to teach you. It's a very important lesson once you get up to my level. Because really, people at the higher level, the new guy that. The new guy thinks, well, they don't respect me. It's like, no, I've been there. That's why I do respect you. Yeah. Every time you lace up the fucking boots and do that job, I know that it sucks because I did it too. That's the whole fucking point, right?
Well, and it's another name sometimes for hazing can also just be testing.
Yeah,
and an example of that is with those young guys, we know those are eventual journeymen.
Yeah.
So, I was told, I went in there with 4 kids at 30 years old. I had been doing what I had done. I had accomplished a lot in my knife career. And you could kind of equate that to a lot of times when people come out of the military and they go into another job. Those guys didn't give a shit about my knife career, and they don't give a shit about your military career, what you did.
Or whatever you did, or where you went to school, or any of that shit.
It doesn't matter. What matters is what you do today and every day after it. And so, for example, the shovel thing, when we were backfilling a pole hole that we had just planted a power pole in the ground, if the foreman grabbed a shovel and started shoveling that shit in there, you were expected as an apprentice, as a young journeyman, or just a groundman, you better wrestle, and we would do it, literally wrestle that foreman to the ground and take his shovel from him. And he wouldn't want to give it up, but you take that shovel and you do the work, right? And it showed that you're stepping in, you're doing that work, you have that self-awareness. But a lot of it was with the hazing. There were times I was treated really super unfairly in certain instances where I knew the guy that was chewing my ass was wrong, but a lot of that was testing to see, how's this guy going to react?
Yeah.
Are you going to blow your top and say, fuck you, foreman, and throw your hard hat and want to get in a fight? Or are you going to eat your shit sandwich and just move on and do better the next day? And really what that testing was for was when you're in a storm and there's trees and power lines and there's incredibly high tensions everywhere, there's potential hot wires, how are you going to perform under pressure?
Yeah.
And then do I trust that guy? And this is why we were such a proponent of bringing in groundmen and then making them apprentices and taking them through that 3.5-year apprenticeship, to where when you turn out, it's much like leaving buds. You become a SEAL, you get pinned, you go to your first unit, and those guys are like, put your fucking trident in the locker and clean the shitter. Right? Like, you think you're a journeyman lineman, but you still haven't done shit, and we don't trust you.
Yeah.
You have to earn that trust. And when you're in a bucket truck and you're around 10,000 volts, 100,000 volts, I need to know that if I'm going to turn around to do something, that you're going to say, hey, watch your back. There's a hot wire right behind you.
Yeah.
And you have each other's back. Your lives are literally on the line with each other.
Yeah.
That sense of community, and those guys are hard on you because they love you, and they also know that if they're not, and they let you get away with stupid shit down the road, it could cost you your life or theirs.
So Machiavelli says, if you are kind when you're supposed to be cruel, you'll be forced to be cruel when you're supposed to be kind, right?
Yeah, that's a great
Simple,
saying.
right? You set the tone. Prepare people. You're doing, everyone, yourself included, but it's all of society, by not holding people accountable. And it's not that. Like, fucking nut up, man. What, you got to have an awkward conversation?
Right.
Oh, no. Life's like a fucking... Come on, man. Is that worse than going to somebody's funeral?
Right.
You know what I mean? It's just fucking a retarded way to look at things.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, hey, man, you got to fucking pay attention. Like, it's like, I don't give a shit if you're getting a divorce at home or if your kid's acting like a shithead. When you walk through those doors and you climb into that bucket and we start flying up in the air, you have to be hyper focused.
Yeah. And I think, I'm working on another piece for Newsweek right now about why about the recruiting crisis. I don't think there is a recruiting crisis. I think there's a crisis of leadership, right, and of mission. People don't believe in any of this stuff
A pride
anymore.
crisis.
So if you, I say this all the time to people. When you and I were in fucking, when we were kids, high school, middle school, whatever the fuck, if somebody were to ask us, what does it mean to be an American, we would have something to say about that, right? And, I think even back then, the vast majority of kids would have some sort of national pride, certainly. Yeah. But they would at least have an answer to that question. If you ask that question now, and look, you would get a myriad of answers, disparate answers. Some people have very different experiences. But if you ask that question now, I don't know that anybody could answer that. You know what I mean? So it's like, because we've accepted shame. We actually use it as a weapon now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Not we use it now as a defensive weapon instead of an offensive weapon. It should be used as an offensive weapon. Hey, what you did is fucking stupid. You should not be proud of that. But you should be proud, or you should want to be proud of the work you've done. Do it better. Fucking lose weight. You know what I mean? Right. Stop being rude to people. You're embarrassing yourself. Stop fucking being an addict. You're embarrassing yourself. You're embarrassing your family. Now it's a shield. It's like, don't body shame me.
Right.
Like, what the fuck are you talking about? You have visceral fat on your organs. You're gonna die.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What the fuck are we even talking about now? We got to turn that corner, and it starts with each individual. When in society, when the individual has the most power, everyone gets taken care of better. Right. When power is bottom up, everybody gets taken of, because you have. The bulk of people are now working towards that goal instead of having just a small amount. Like the government, how big is the government? 2 million people, I think. Yeah. Like if you include all of state, local, and federal government in America, it's something like not including the military and shit, it's something like 2 million people.
Out of 350 million.
Yeah. So it's like, so the 2 million, they're just going to take care of everybody's problems. No, you take care of your own fucking problems.
Right.
And that's why we set it up this way. And it has the added benefit of being resilient against authoritarianism as well, right? Because when the government shows up and nobody has their hand out, they don't have any fucking power there.
Well, nobody cares about walking a tightrope if there's a safety net under you.
Yep.
If there's a safety net under you, all of a sudden that tightrope, you become a lot more hyper aware, vigilant.
No.
And it's sad, man. Like you walk out last night, we walk out from dinner getting ready to go to Joe's place, and there's.
Where'd you go to dinner, by the way?
V's. Is it Danny V's or
Eddie V's?
Eddie V's.
Yeah, it's good.
It was really good.
Yeah.
But we walked out from there, and there was I counted 10 homeless people sleeping on the street out there at 9:30 at night. And it's just, and quite honestly, if you expect government to fix it, how can government fix it? They're not going to fix it. There is no easy answer.
No. I mean, because it's like, you can't, it's like, it's custom and a la carte, right? Just like your diet. It's going to be a little bit different. There are some general principles that we can all, there's a nutritional fact sheet that applies to everybody, right? But I am plussed up or deficient on different things than you are, right? My body absorbs things in a different way than yours, so my diet has to be different by necessity. So you can't have a food pyramid that tells people, well, you should eat this amount of servings of this. Not that any of that information was even correct at all.
It was actually flipped.
But the format is wrong. You know what I mean? Like, that's not how you do that shit. You don't need a certain amount of this, this, and this, and you can't prescribe that to 300 million people. That's fucking stupid, right?
Right.
So it only works from the ground up because it gets tailored customly to people. And then when enough people in a certain area have this, which is, it's why, some level of a homogenous society is more effective. Like Sweden, Northern European countries were more resistant to COVID shit than we were, right? Because they are all of that one race. It doesn't mean that you should fucking start fencing off your places by race. I'm not saying that, but it does. It's just an example of why that is more effective in that particular regard. So we're not going to be like that. We are globally a melting pot to some degree now in most places. So the solution is to stop thinking like old homogenous society and think like new integrated society. And be like, okay, well, we absolutely have to have things built from the ground up, leadership from the ground up, products from the ground up, so on and so forth. so that they even can be tailored, right? Otherwise, it's going to get this whatever this is, this integrated globalist society is going to continue down that path, and we're going to continue getting weaker and dumber unless we just change our game plan up a little bit.
So, I have an idea that I think the government could actually participate in with federal funding and make a difference, and it would be in a way to actually provide some hope. So, for kids in the inner city, if you're 11 or 12 and you're in the inner city, maybe you don't have a father, your mother's working however many jobs, maybe you don't have any parents at all. You're basically being raised by the streets. When you look around and all you see are homeless people sleeping on the street, drugs being dealt by your older brothers, everything going on, where's the hope, right? And I truly kind of understand. The more I've traveled in knife making in the last 20 years and been to places outside of Montana, I realize, like, when I'm walking around in the Bronx, and I did that several times where I just walk the streets, places I probably shouldn't have been. If I'm truly honest, I look around and I'm like, man, I was 11 years old and I had a guy that hunted, that was Little League baseball coach, that offered to teach me how to make knives. How is that happening in these inner cities? Like, that's not happening, right? And so if the federal government funded something where they went into the worst areas of, say, Chicago, LA, those places, and you build a huge facility and you put a toilet and a sink and a refrigerator and a few things on the other end of the building, and you said to a group of kids, we're going to build some walls from here to there. We're going to make some rooms, and then we're going to run electricity from this part of the building to that bathroom. We're going to turn those lights on. We're going to turn the refrigerator on in the kitchen. And then we're also going to take water from here, and we're going to plumb pipes all the way across this building, and we're going to make that toilet flush. And we're going to teach you how to build a roof, to do wiring, shingles, plumbing, all that stuff. If I would give kids even the opportunity, if they're 15, 16 years old and flunking everything, to drop out of high school and enter that building and learn trades from the ground up, and then show those kids and say, hey, did you know a starting wage for a journeyman lineman is $27 an hour? Not a journeyman lineman. For a groundman. A groundman.
And then it's for
a piece of shit groundman.
For a journeyman lineman, I think it's like, isn't it like in the low 40s?
It's 45.
Yeah, 45.
Yeah.
I mean, that's ridiculous amount of money. Same thing with welding, electricians. I mean, which is stuff that we need. We're not running. We're still going to be drinking water. We're still going to need power. What the fuck, man? These aren't going away.
Right.
You know what I mean?
So you sit those kids down, and so let's say half those, 4 or 5 of those kids, they just take, for some reason, they just take to the plumbing. Like, they can do pipe fitting. They get it. Somehow they understand. Or the electricity part. Like, electricity, we always refer to it as FM, which is fucking magic. But some people's brains just got it.
Oh, yeah.
And they just understand, like, electricity flows through here, and there's resistance, and there's grounding, and this and that.
Same with architecture. Like, some people see in 3D like that. They're able to design, like, okay, I've got this much space. I'm probably going to need to put the second story on that side of the building. They just understand it.
Maybe it's concrete.
Yeah.
Maybe it's framing and understanding structure, and they can build that whole building in their brain. And they'll
never know that unless they fucking get into the weeds on it. You know what I mean?
And that's a government program that you could fund, and you could say, and at the end of it, guys, we're going to rip it all out, and the next class is going to come in. You're going to learn how to demo, to tear down, how to take this thing apart. And then what we're going to do with all that material, we're going to salvage it, we're going to take it down and recycle it. And you show those kids how to build something and be proud of something when they walk away. In my first knife shop, it's actually sitting at my house right now. My first knife shop that wasn't the one my dad built in a lean-to. My senior year construction class in high school built it. It's a shed. We built that. I bought all the materials myself. My senior classmates, I had like 10 classmates in that particular class. We built that shed, and I drug it home on the ice with my dad's backhoe in the winter. But I
use it for ice fishing still, or not still, but like back. You use it for ice fishing, or you just put it at your house?
No, I drug it home and I used it for my knife making.
Oh, okay.
And then I bought an old trailer house frame, and I cut it down, and we lifted it up with our backhoes, and I put on that frame. And when I first got married and moved to Missoula, I drug it into Missoula and plugged it into my boss's wall of his shop and his parking lot. Worked out of it for a year, and then it sat next to my house that I bought or that I built for the next 3 years, that was my shop, a 10 by 14 shed. And the point is I had an incredible pride in that as a kid, that my classmates and I built that.
It's called the IKEA effect, by the way.
What's that?
So if you construct something with your own hands, even if it's only the last 20%, this is where the IKEA part comes in. So if you buy something from the store even that is mostly prefab, but you assemble the last 20% yourself, then you will hold on to that piece of material longer than you normally would.
Interesting.
It's
you have more appreciation.
Yes, it's a very well-studied psychological principle, but it happens in every facet of life, not just from manufacturing goods around your house or anything, but like the investment you have in your business and people even, right? Like the more time and energy you give to a human being, the more you're going to care for that person.
Yeah.
And it's a reciprocal thing as well, right? Yeah. And that used to be the thing that bound us all together. Our grandparents' generation and pretty much every generation before them, this is how life went. I'm of a certain age, so I'm going to learn a trade or join the military, or whatever it was you're going to do. I'm going to find a profession, and I'm going to find a wife, and then we're going to make some kids, and I'm going to make sure those kids' lives are better than mine somehow. Right. And that is a very good template for society.
Why are we forcing these kids who are 16, 15 years old, have had nothing in their life? They're flunking everything. And you either say we're gonna just flush you through all the way through the system through 12th grade and kick you out in the street, and we're gonna pat ourselves on the back and say you graduated.
Yeah.
You know, or why are we gonna force that kid to be miserable to sit in class? Because let's face it, young men were not designed to sit 8 hours a day in a classroom.
No, I don't think anybody was, but certainly not young boys. I mean, it's like, but luckily we've got pills to give them, so they'll calm down. Right?
All this ADD bullshit, and I look at a lot of these kids, and this is where I disagree with a lot of my friends, but a lot of this ADD stuff where we're giving kids pills, that kid either needs his ass beat and told to shut the fuck up and sit down, or he's just a boy and he's just busy and he's full of piss and vinegar and he needs something to do.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a business owner, right, and you have, let's say you've got a slow-ish tempo business, and this dude's just bouncing off the walls all the time. As somebody, or in the military or something like that, as somebody who is trying to leverage human capital, which is what you should be trying to do if you're a fucking business owner,
right?
Or if you're an educator or anything, if you're in any part of the supply chain of delivering a good human being that's a productive member of society, you should be trying to leverage human capital at the best possible way you can. And a big part of that is taking care of people and shit like that. But if you see somebody who is overactive like that, that's a tool. It's not a fucking, it is a feature, not a bug.
Right.
You do not need to treat that person. You need to give them something to do, man.
Yeah.
And it's so, like, luckily for me, my parents refused to put me on anything. They had their own problems. I'm not terribly close to my mom. I don't talk to my dad at all. He was a cunt. But they at least had the temerity not to fall for that stupid bullshit and to stand up to the school and be like, no, he's 6 years old. He's a boy.
Right. He
wants to be out in the field fucking tearing shit up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You're not going to give him a pill.
They wanted to hold me back in kindergarten, and all I wanted to be out was with my dad on his backhoes.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what I did all summer. I mean, I worked. I had, lawn mowing business, and I was driving dump truck when I was, 10 years old. But I grew up in Montana. That kid in the inner city of Chicago, he doesn't get to drive a dump truck.
Yeah.
Like,
and who's like, so in Montana, if let's say your dad dies, right, or something, your dad's not in the picture, there's going to be a lot more creative and manly, let's call it manly outlets.
There's a lot better chance that kid's going to get scooped up by a coach, another parent.
There is nothing like that in inner cities.
No.
Nothing.
No.
Right? Like, how is that possible?
There is. You can get scooped up into dealing
gang
drugs.
Activity. Yeah, it's like, so how is that after all this time, since the 1960s, still the case? How is that still the only fucking option?
Right. I
don't understand that. Like, that's why, like, people that vote for, or people that are diehard left-leaning, it's like, I understand that might be your political philosophy, but this is people's lives. You know what I mean? At some point, some level of practicality has to come into the equation. What exactly has the Democratic Party done for black people in inner cities? Because please give me a list of the things they've done, aside from making you feel like a victim.
I even think, there again, where federal money could go into helping subsidize would even be helping with like parenting classes. I have always said to young parents that are getting ready to have a kid, it's my opinion that 90% of your job of parenting is done when that kid is 4 years old.
4 to 6, actually. Yeah, that's right. That's what my psychiatrist friend or psychologist friends tell me, between 4 and 6 years old.
And I really believe it's more like around 2 to 3. And the reason for that is we don't give kids enough credit for what they're capable of. If you take a young baby home from the hospital and that kid starts crying in its crib, and you grab it out of its crib and you take it back to your bed with you, and then the next night you put it in its crib, it starts crying, and you go grab it and you come and put it back in your bed with you. Try on the third night getting that kid out of its crib, feeding it, doing whatever, and put it back in its crib and see how that goes. That baby will fall asleep between mom and dad in a heartbeat. If you go put that kid in its crib, it's going to scream.
Right.
That kid is already manipulating you. And that baby is literally weeks old.
It's no different than a dog.
Months old.
Like you have to set the tone, man.
Yeah, kennel training.
Yeah.
You're crib training a kid to stay in its crib and sleep, and that's where home is. It's no different than kennel training a dog.
And it's that Machiavelli principle.
And those kids will absolutely manipulate parents well before they ever can speak a word.
Yeah.
And if you set the tone, you set expectations. We always gave our kids options. It was like, hey, you can clean your room right now, or you can clean your room right after dinner, but you're going to clean your room before you go to bed. And guess what? You get to the point where that time of night comes and it's like, hey, if you don't clean this up in the next 5 minutes, you're getting a spanking. You're getting your ass slapped or whatever the consequence is. But kids have to understand and they have to realize that you are going to actually follow through with and that's the other thing, make demands that you will actually follow through on.
Yeah.
If you tell them you're going to take their birthday away, you're a retard.
Yeah, that's not happening.
Yeah. But there again, with these inner cities, that's how you provide hope and actually give these kids a chance of being like, hey, at 15, 16 years old, we're going to send you over to this program over here. You're going to go work with Dan and Bill and John, and these guys are going to teach you skills and trades. And when you walk out of here, you're going to understand that you could leave here and have job placements for them set up already. There are people dying for help. Roofing is a hard job. Tearing off roofs, tearing off shingles, right? Roofs. You could place these kids out of these positions and tell them that, hey, you're going to start off on the tear-off crew, but in 6 years, you could be managing the install crew. Like, you can be managing people by the time you're 20 years old, 25 years old. I have a 21-year-old employee right now that is managing people. But
it's not uncommon to be 20 to 22 and be a sergeant in the Army and in charge of 3 other human lives. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In the most serious situation you could be in, combat. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, that's not uncommon, frankly.
Well, look back through history and see what people were doing at 15, 14.
Lafayette was 24 years old, but a guy from a French general was 24 years old. He is one of the most effective commanders in the Revolutionary War for America.
Yeah.
And the vast majority, except for John Adams, George Washington, and Ben Franklin, and a couple others, the vast majority of the founding fathers were in their 20s, mid to late 20s, but in their 20s. So this is like, our people certainly weren't smarter back then.
Right.
They didn't have access to the same information we did, or the same type of. They were just more mature, right? And that only happens when you throw people out into the water and let them swim.
I remember kids teasing me when I was in high school, be like, you just going to be a ditch digger someday like your dad? And it's like, actually, that'd be a fucking great job.
Yeah, no shit. Like, it pays pretty well.
He does pretty well.
Yeah.
He built a real nice business for himself over the years. A journeyman lineman makes between $120,000 and $250,000 a year.
Good Lord.
And it's a 3.5-year apprenticeship in which they pay you the entire time. You don't pay to get paid to go to college unless you're an NIL contract.
Yeah, no shit. Yeah.
And that's the thing I try to explain to kids is like, if you can't go to college, you don't want to go to college, whatever, you get a job making $25 an hour, and every 6 months you get a pay raise for 3.5 years and you become a journeyman. And you have a skill that you can do anywhere in the nation. If you decide to move to New Jersey or Florida, it doesn't matter.
Same thing with truck driving. I think, as a matter of fact, I think truck driving is the highest aggregate paying job for a non-college educated man in America.
Yep.
And we're still somewhere between 3 and 6 million truck drivers short right now.
Yep. If you can pass a CDL test and pass a piss test, you can have a job 1,000%.
And make good money too. So we got to wrap up here, but there are all these problems that we are always bitching about. There's solutions, every single one of them. And almost every time the solution is to take personal responsibility of yourself first, certainly, but also you are your brother's keeper.
Yep.
The end. That's the fucking moral of that story. You are your brother's keeper. It's your job to make sure everybody, especially as a man, it is your job to make sure everybody around you is taken care of.
Right.
You know what I mean? And you should when you see one of the people around you failing, you should feel shame, and you should overcome that shame so you can be proud of your situation again.
Right. Yep, absolutely. And what I hope people take away from what we've been doing at Montana Knife Company is that we are a group of completely unspecial people. We are not special. I am definitely not a special person. I didn't have a special, I didn't have a bunch of money. It was completely bootstrapped. I had no idea how to manufacture on scale. I was making one knife at a time, one knife a month. And I went to right now we're making about 1,000 knives a week, all in 3 years. And it was all from just reading, asking questions, researching, and growing it from a really small point to a bigger point. And we hope that we're actually just getting started. You look at Evan Hafer, just a dumbass from Idaho, and what he built with Black Rifle Coffee. Right, from a little logging town in Idaho, I'm from a little logging town in Montana. Not that I'm trying to compare the two of us, but the point is neither one of us were really that special. But it takes a lot of work and drive, and don't be afraid to get other people's help. You know, Evan had other people help him with Black Rifle. I didn't know anything about marketing. I went and asked for help and found a business partner. You know, so don't be too proud to say I don't know. And ultimately, you can build what we're building in your community. And if we had 10,000 little Montana knife companies all over the country, it'd be a hell of a lot better place.
Yeah, because 10,000 Montana knife companies result in 10,000 leather companies and 10,000 butcher board companies and so on and so forth. Right. I mean, it's again, I'll say it, when we all do better, we all do better. And everybody can find you at montanaknifecompany.com or Montana Knife Company, pretty much everywhere on social media, right? Mostly on Instagram, I think you guys work.
Yeah, mostly. We're on Facebook and Instagram. And then my personal one is just Josh Smith Knives. If I put up more on there of just kind of my personal life, maybe my political opinions from time to time. But
well, I think they dovetail nicely with the knife community, so I'm not sure you're going to have any issues there.
Yeah.
Go check out Montana Knife Company. Thanks for coming today, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for doing this podcast. What you're doing here is important.
Yeah, I hope so. We'll see, right? Just keep pushing at it.
Well, if 10,000 more people did this kind of thing, it would also
100%,
make a difference.
Yeah, rising tide lifts all boats, right? And thank you all for listening. This has been Citizen.